Top 10 gemstones that will define wealth in the next 20 years. For the last 100 years, wealth was measured in carats of diamond, weight in gold, and names passed down through auction houses. But that formula is breaking, quietly, methodically, and in ways most people will never see coming. In 2025, the most aggressively acquired gemstones aren't the ones worn by royalty or pushed by marketing. They're stones that shift color when the light changes. That exists on only one mountain. That sell not sold by name, but by origin, inclusion, and absorption spectra. This is not about fashion. It's about mineralogical finality. You're about to see 10 gemstones that investors, curators, and entire governments are quietly tracking. Not for what they look like, but for what they represent. The following is the definition of wealth. Don't forget to press and hold that like button, leave a comment, and hit subscribe before we begin. Ranked 10th, Taaffeite. A gemstone was sold, cut, and placed in a shop window without anyone realizing it wasn't what they thought. Not the jeweler, not the buyer, not even the gemologist who handled it. The error persisted until 1945, when Richard Taaffeite, an Austrian-born gem enthusiast living in Ireland, examined a violet spinel purchased from a second-hand dealer. He doubted the classification. After sending it for detailed mineralogical testing, the verdict came back. This wasn't spinel. It was something entirely different. Chemically similar, yet crystallographically distinct. What emerged was a scientific anomaly. Taaffeite, the only known gemstone ever discovered not on Earth, but in the jewelry trade, already faceted and already sold. Structurally, Taaffeite differs from spinel by a single but critical factor: symmetry. While spinel forms in an isometric system, Taaffeite crystallizes in a hexagonal structure. This slight shift creates unique optical behavior, including double refraction, and positions it as a mineralogical outlier. For decades, it remained largely unknown outside academic circles of gemology. Most rough stones were discarded or mislabeled, especially in Sri Lankan and Malagasy alluvial gravels, where they often appeared alongside garnet and spinel. Its rise in value didn't come from celebrity endorsements or royal patronage, but from the gradual recognition of its rarity in both the lab and the market. By the early 2010s, collectors in Singapore, Hong Kong, and Geneva began actively seeking Taaffeite stones over 1 carat, especially those with rich purplish-red hues and full traceability. The supply, however, remained essentially unchanged. As of 2025, fewer than 10,000 carats have ever entered the gem market, and of those, the majority are under 1 carat and heavily included. High-clarity specimens with deep color have begun to command auction prices once reserved for the finest grades of sapphire or spinel. In the next 2 decades, Taaffeite is unlikely to become a household name. Its value will not lie in mass recognition, but in its origin story, its geological misfile, and the sharp shift in how mineralogical errors are now priced as assets. For those tracking market anomalies and structural misclassifications, Taaffeite has already crossed the line between curiosity and capital. Ranked 9th, Demantoid Garnet. For nearly 7 decades, Demantoid Garnet remained a name buried in museum catalogs and forgotten inventories. Not because it lacked brilliance, but because history had misplaced it. In the late 19th century, it was regarded as one of the most desirable green gemstones in the world. Tsarist Russia prized it for its extraordinary dispersion, a property that gave the gem a fiery light unmatched by even diamond. Carl Fabergé selected Demantoid for imperial commissions. But by the early 20th century, global access to the Ural Mountains was interrupted. First by war, then by revolution. Trade routes closed, mining ceased, and with the fall of the Romanovs, the gemstone that once defined Russian wealth quietly disappeared from circulation. Demantoid is not only rare, but also structurally unique. Belonging to the andradite variety of the garnet group, it is composed of calcium and iron silicates formed under high-temperature metamorphic conditions, often within serpentinized ultramafic rocks. Its refractive index, ranging from 1.88 to 1.94, and dispersion rate of 0.057 surpass that of diamond, making it one of the most optically active gemstones ever documented. What sets Demantoid apart, however, is not just its fire, but its inclusions. In the finest Russian specimens, fine fibrous inclusions of bacillite curve outward like a horsetail, a naturally formed pattern that became an unintentional signature of Uralian origin. These inclusions, once considered flaws, are now authentication marks. The re-emergence of Demantoid in the 1990s was not market-driven. It was archival. European gemologists reviewing stones from late imperial periods began cross-referencing catalogs, matching specific inclusions with known mining districts near Nizhny Tagil and Berezovsk. Once the original Russian mines resumed limited production under private ownership, demand quietly resumed, not among mass retailers, but within elite collecting circles, particularly in Switzerland, Japan, and northern Italy. While Namibia and Madagascar introduced new sources of green garnet, these lack the horsetail inclusion and historical traceability that collectors now demand. Auction records from 2016 onward show a sharp divergence in prices. Demantoid from Namibia may reach $3,000 to $5,000 per carat. Russian stones over 1 carat with intact horsetails have sold for $18,000 to $28,000 per carat, depending on provenance. In the realm of investment, Demantoid is not a commodity gemstone. It is anti-commodity, governed not by volume or trend, but by geological nuance and historical disruption. Most garnet is dismissed as abundant and of low value. Demantoid rejects that premise entirely. It has no synthetic analog, no industrial pipeline, and no marketing campaign. Its supply cannot be scaled. The mines in Russia remain small-scale, seasonal, and ecologically constrained. Extraction often yields stones under 0.5 carats, and the largest known museum-quality specimens rarely exceed 5 carats in weight. The collectors driving its price growth are not casual buyers. They are portfolio managers for generational estates, heritage gem curators, and specialists in pre-revolutionary Russian material culture. What they are purchasing is not just color or clarity, but continuity, a mineral from a specific mountain range, with an inclusion unique to a geological process, tied to an era that ended violently and irrevocably. The market for Demantoid is not speculative, it is archival. From an asset perspective, Demantoid Garnet offers two factors that few colored stones can. It has an upper ceiling of quality that is fixed by nature and a traceable decline in accessible material. With environmental restrictions tightening on mining in the Urals and no new horsetail-producing deposits discovered in the last 30 years, the window for acquisition is contracting. As global markets begin to distinguish between stones of passing popularity and those with museum-grade permanence, Demantoid's trajectory becomes clear. It will not trend on social media, it will not appear on mass-market engagement rings, but for those curating wealth across generations, particularly where mineral origin, scientific verifiability, and imperial provenance matter, Demantoid Garnet has re-entered the vocabulary of enduring value. Ranked 8th, Imperial Topaz. In the state of Minas Gerais, southeast Brazil, there is a stretch of land where only one kind of gemstone is formed, and nowhere else on Earth reproduces its exact chemical and optical characteristics. This region, Ouro Preto, has become the sole recognized source of Imperial Topaz, a naturally colored variety of aluminum silicate with hues ranging from deep golden orange to salmon pink. Unlike the common blue topaz produced through radiation treatment, Imperial Topaz is unmodified. Its color is geological, not industrial, and that difference is everything. Geologically, Imperial Topaz crystallizes in cavities of rhyolitic rock or hydrothermal quartz veins under rare fluorine-rich conditions. Its formation requires a delicate balance of pressure, temperature, and trace elements, factors that have only consistently occurred in Ouro Preto. The rarity isn't just a matter of quantity, it's in its geological uniqueness. No other deposit has reproduced the saturated, reddish-orange coloration that qualifies it for the imperial trade classification. Historically, the control began early. During the Brazilian Empire in the 1800s, stones of this color were restricted by decree, reserved for the royal court, and forbidden for export. That limitation established a legacy of exclusivity. Over time, the name imperial evolved beyond its original association with monarchy and became a commercial standard, although it was not an official mineralogical term. Even today, laboratories like GIA categorize the stone by color and origin, acknowledging the persistent influence of a geopolitical branding decision made over 150 years ago. The mine's ownership structure has changed, but the constraints remain the same. Ouro Preto is now a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and mining is tightly regulated. Only a handful of small-scale operators are allowed to extract, and most production comes from manually sorted gravel washed in hillside runoff. Annual yields of top-quality Imperial Topaz are measured in kilograms, not tons, and those above 5 carats in perfect clarity are exceedingly rare. No secondary sources have emerged, and synthetic replicas have proven commercially non-viable. This bottleneck has defined its investment behavior. Imperial Topaz is not a speculative boom asset. Its price increases are slow, incremental, and built around collector confidence in geological singularity. In markets like Tokyo and Geneva, it is categorized alongside Alexandrite and Paraíba Tourmaline, stones with single-source supply chains and no viable substitutes. Yet risk is building from the opposite direction: scarcity. Unlike diamonds, which benefit from scalable industrial mining and vast global reserves, Imperial Topaz is non-renewable in a literal sense. When the Ouro Preto veins are exhausted or restricted further for environmental conservation, there will be no second deposit to meet demand. The absence of new supply will not drive sudden spikes. It will drive market exit. In that scenario, existing stones become artifacts of a closed system, frozen not just in time, but in geography. As the gemstone market begins to reward assets defined by control, traceability, and geological singularity, Imperial Topaz stands apart, not because it dominates headlines, but because it cannot be scaled, replicated, or relocated. Over the next 20 years, its value will come not from trends, but from its limits. Ranked 7th, Mahenge Garnet. For most of the 20th century, garnet had no place in the vocabulary of wealth. It was a workhorse gemstone, abundant, affordable, and functionally ignored by auction houses. Even in collector circles, garnet signaled ornamental value, not investment potential. So when a new garnet surfaced in northern Tanzania in 2007, it was filed under the same category. The trade name was simple: Mahenge Garnet. The price was modest. The assumptions were automatic. They didn't last. The stones that emerged from Mahenge were chemically part of the Paraíba Tourmaline series, a known system already well cataloged. However, the optical properties did not match expectations. The color hovered between hot pink and electric red, unlike anything previously recorded in natural garnet. Under daylight, the stones fluoresced subtly, giving the illusion of an internal glow. Under magnification, their clarity was near loupe clean. Gemologists confirmed that there was no heating, no diffusion, and no coating. This wasn't treatment. It was a mineralogical deviation. Buyers in Bangkok were the first to notice, then Geneva, then Hong Kong. Within 2 years, Mahenge Garnet transitioned from a curiosity-driven anomaly to a high-demand one. Prices rose fivefold between 2008 and 2012, and yet the broader market resisted. The label garnet continued to suppress valuation, a psychological boundary shaped by decades of commodity pricing. By 2016, the resistance fractured. A 7.3-carat Mahenge Garnet, graded unheated and flawless, with complete origin documentation, sold for over $65,000 at a private sale in Zurich. It wasn't the price that mattered, it was the reset. From that point forward, Mahenge stones were no longer priced as garnet. They were priced as phenomena, judged by performance, not classification. Geologically, Mahenge Garnet is the product of localized manganese enrichment in metamorphic terrains under unique pressure-temperature constraints. The color arises from a specific balance of iron 2+ and manganese 3+ ions within a cubic silicate lattice, a balance not replicated in garnets from India, Sri Lanka, or Madagascar. In gemology, that balance is unrepeatable. It means that Mahenge is not just a locality, it is a distinct community. It is a mineralogical event. Mining peaked between 2007 and 2011. Today, most high-quality material circulating in auctions originates from those early extraction years. Current output has diminished sharply, not because of exhaustion, but because the small-scale pits that yielded the best stones have become economically or politically constrained. Traders in Nairobi and Arusha report a sharp decline in the availability of unheated, high-saturation rough over 2 carats. That scarcity is finally being priced. In 2025, Mahenge Garnet sits at the center of a market shift, one where mineral classification no longer dictates asset value. The assumption that garnet is cheap has been replaced by a more precise metric: origin, chemistry, and optical performance. Stones above 5 carats, untreated, with neon coloration and documented provenance from 2007 to 2010, now trade within the same pricing corridors as Burmese Spinel or even entry-level rubies. In the next 20 years, Mahenge Garnet will not redefine the garnet family. It will remain separate, misclassified on purpose, defiant of category. For investors, it offers something that no branding can replicate: a clean geological anomaly, exposed at the right time, suppressed by convention, and corrected by market force. Its value will not come from what it was called, but from what it refused to be. Ranked 6th, Burmese Spinel. For over 6 centuries, one of the world's most valuable gemstones was misidentified. The 170-carat stone set into the imperial state crown of Britain, long called the Black Prince's Ruby, is not a ruby, it is Spinel. So is the 361-carat Timur ruby in the British crown jewels, and the 398-carat Sumerian Spinel, once in the Iranian crown. These were never frauds. They were misclassifications, accepted at the time, uncorrected for centuries. Spinel was long caught between names and values. Its deep red color mimicked ruby too perfectly. But while ruby belongs to the corundum group and contains chromium and aluminum, Spinel is a magnesium aluminum oxide with a cubic structure and no pleochorism. Visually similar, geologically distinct. The mistake persisted until spectroscopic methods and chemical testing became widespread in the 20th century. By then, the damage had already been done. Spinel had become known, wrongly, as ruby's understudy. Prices reflected that perception. Geologically, Spinel forms in contact metamorphic zones, especially in marbles rich in magnesium. Of all localities, the Mogok region in Myanmar produces the most vivid and transparent specimens. Burmese Spinel exhibits an intense, saturated red, often with a trace of pink fluorescence under UV light. Unlike Spinel from Sri Lanka or Africa, Mogok stones exhibit a purity of hue with minimal zoning, a trait increasingly prized by collectors and laboratories alike. In the early 2000s, a quiet revaluation began. Laboratories started separating Spinel from ruby not only by mineral species, but also by market role. Auction houses followed. In 2015, a 50-carat Burmese Spinel sold for $29,000 per carat at Sotheby's Geneva, setting a precedent that would realign the gemstone's status. Spinel was no longer defined by what it wasn't. It was priced for what it was. Since then, Burmese Spinel has emerged as a class of its own, not an alternative to ruby, but a correction to a historic misvaluation. Prices have stabilized in the range of $10,000 to $25,000 per carat for stones above 5 carats with vivid red or pink-red hue and no treatment. The finest specimens now change hands not in gem fairs, but in private placements, often between collectors specializing in pre-modern royalty sets or recut heirlooms. Supply, however, has shifted. The Mogok mines, once open and accessible, have faced increasing restrictions since Myanmar's political shifts in 2021. Many of the best stones in circulation today were mined before that date, and no equivalent deposit has been found elsewhere. Tanzanian Spinel offers bright pinks, while Vietnamese Spinel offers clarity. However, neither replicates the deep red fluorescence of Burmese origin. What makes Burmese Spinel unique is not just color or clarity, it is restitution. A mineral once dismissed as ruby's mistake is now priced as ruby's rival, not by marketing, but by market correction. For investors, this shift reflects a deeper pattern, that in the gemstone world, the long arc of valuation bends toward geological truth. In the next 20 years, Burmese Spinel is unlikely to be misunderstood again. Its clarity is no longer just physical, it's historical. Ranked 5th, Red Beryl, Bixbyte. At its peak, the Ruby Violet mine in western Utah produced fewer than 10,000 carats of rough red beryl per year. Of that amount, less than 5% qualified as gem quality, and only a fraction yielded cut stones over 1 carat. The yield wasn't low because of inefficiency. It was low because the mineral itself doesn't form in quantity. The geological window for red beryl is razor thin. Red beryl belongs to the same mineral group as emerald, aquamarine, and morganite. But unlike those, it forms not in pegmatite or schist, but in topaz-bearing rhyolite, under a specific combination of beryllium saturation, manganese concentration, and fluorine gas. This environment exists in commercial quantities only in one place, the Wah Wah Mountains of Utah. Other locations, such as New Mexico or Sonora, have yielded trace specimens, but none have delivered first-grade material at scale. Geologically, red beryl is not rare. It is singular. By the mid-1980s, collectors and gemologists began to take notice. The color range, raspberry to pure crimson, was unlike any beryl seen before. Stones were small but clean. No heat, no treatment, no enhancement. Just a red crystal with complex formation and zero duplication. Despite early resistance from retailers uncertain how to price it, the gem gained traction through scientific publications and museum exhibitions. By 2000, red beryl had become part of the asset language of natural resource investment. The mine closed in 2014. All remaining supply circulates through legacy dealers, estate auctions, and private holdings. Most stones above 2 carats can be traced back to original inventories sold between 1985 and 1995. Attempts to synthetically reproduce red beryl have failed to reach economic viability. The cost of laboratory replication often exceeds the natural price of the gemstone. What remains is a static volume. Each sale is a transfer of a non-renewable geological artifact. Market behavior reflects this. Prices are not driven by trend or media exposure. They are driven by availability. A 3.1 carat unheated red beryl from Utah sold in Hong Kong for $92,000 in 2023. A 5.6 carat stone, GIA certified with provenance dating back to before 2000, was withdrawn from auction after exceeding its reserve bid. Not because it failed to sell, but because the owner reconsidered liquidation. From a financial standpoint, red beryl occupies a category beyond jewelry. It serves no industrial purpose, has no commercial application, and is not used in mass markets. Its value is derived entirely from physical scarcity and geological singularity. For investors, this creates a rare condition, a gemstone that cannot be scaled, substituted, or replaced, and whose source is not only closed, but also non-replicable. Over the next 20 years, red beryl is unlikely to appreciate like ruby or sapphire. It will transition from gemstone to geologic record, from ornament to asset class, from rarity to finality. Ranked 4th, Padparadscha Sapphire. The majority of stones submitted as Padparadscha Sapphires do not pass. Some are too pink, some are too orange. Some show zoning that pushes the hue outside the defined boundary. Others, while beautiful, have undergone heat treatment or beryllium diffusion, rendering them entirely disqualified. What remains after all eliminations is a small class of stones that conform to a color range so narrow that even laboratory graders debate the edges. Padparadscha Sapphire is not defined by its rarity of occurrence, but by the precision of its classification. Its value begins where exclusion ends. In mineralogical terms, it is simply corundum, the same species as ruby or blue sapphire. However, the chemical and optical window required to produce a true Padparadscha is unusually narrow, a blend of pink and orange in perfect balance, with a medium tone, moderate saturation, and no secondary modifiers. According to GIA and SSEF, stones must exhibit this harmony naturally, without treatment, and show no strong pleochroism. Even 1 degree of deviation, towards salmon, amber, or peach, can move the specimen out of classification. Historically, the term originates from the Sinhalese word Padmaraga, which refers to the lotus blossom, not for its romantic symbolism, but for its distinctive color gradient. In Sri Lanka, these stones were recognized long before Western markets acknowledged their uniqueness. But with modern lab standards applied, many traditional stones were reclassified. The very act of naming the color became a filtering mechanism. Today, Padparadscha Sapphire exists at the intersection of tradition and scientific scrutiny. Stones from Sri Lanka that meet the standard, untreated, vividly colored, with no dominance of orange or pink, are scarce. Madagascar and Tanzania have produced similar materials, but many of these stones display greater zoning or require heat to stabilize their hue. As a result, only a limited portion of global output qualifies. Market behavior reflects this bottleneck. At auctions in Geneva, New York, and Tokyo, Padparadscha sapphires exceeding 3 carats, with full laboratory confirmation, consistently sell for $50,000 to $90,000 per carat. Yet the majority of listings are rejected before they ever reach bidding because they fail to meet a color definition that remains to this day partly interpretive. This ambiguity has become the very source of value. Unlike ruby or emerald, which are judged by intensity, Padparadscha is judged by precision. It cannot be darker. It cannot be redder. It must be both and neither. A stone that exists only within a narrow window of hue, origin, and untreated formation. For investors, this creates a rare scenario, a gemstone that commands a premium, not because it stands out, but because it fits a definition so tightly enforced that most candidates fail. Its rise in prominence has not come from marketing campaigns or industrial expansion, but from the clarity of its exclusion. In the coming decades, Padparadscha Sapphire will likely remain where it is, outside the mainstream, inside the lab reports, and priced not by beauty alone, but by whether it meets the qualification criteria. Ranked third, Paraíba Tourmaline. When the first electric blue tourmaline appeared at the 1989 Tucson Gem Show, dealers thought it was synthetic. No natural gemstone had ever displayed that intensity of neon color. The crystal came from an obscure pegmatite deposit in Paraíba, Brazil, dug not by industrial companies, but by a man named Heitor Dimas Barbosa, who had spent 6 years tunneling through volcanic rock with minimal funding. What he found was not just a new gemstone, it was a new category of color. Paraíba Tourmaline, chemically, is a copper-bearing L-bate, a lithium-rich tourmaline altered by the presence of copper ions. This trace element shifts the absorption spectrum into a range that produces vivid turquoise, swimming pool blue, and greenish neon. Under daylight, the gem seems to emit light. Under UV, it often glows. Unlike traditional tourmaline, which can appear dark or murky in larger sizes, Paraíba remains vibrant even in stones over 1 carat. The market reaction was immediate and disoriented. Prices for tourmaline, which had historically been under $500 per carat, were suddenly exceeding $10,000. By the early 2000s, Brazilian Paraíba diamonds over 3 carats had reached diamond equivalent prices. Some dealers resisted the shift, claiming the color was too extreme to be natural. Others rushed to acquire the remaining rough from the original mine. Within a decade, the main Paraíba deposit was functionally depleted. Then came Mozambique. In 2005, similar copper-bearing tourmaline began appearing from Africa. Chemically identical, optically similar, but geologically distinct. The debate began. Should the term Paraíba refer to color, chemistry, or origin? Laboratories responded with a compromise. GEA, SSEF, and AGTA agreed. Any copper-bearing tourmaline exhibiting the neon blue-green spectrum could be classified as Paraíba type. But in auction houses and high-end boutiques, the distinction held. Brazilian origin stones remain more valuable. A 4.1 carat Mozambique Paraíba might sell for $60,000. A Brazilian stone of similar quality could fetch double or more simply due to its source. Today, the gap has widened further. Demand in Japan, South Korea, and the Gulf states favors provenance as much as appearance. Paraíba from Brazil is not just rare, it is finite. The mines have stopped producing meaningful quantities. Almost all high-grade Brazilian material now circulates through estate resales or private transactions. often accompanied by GIA reports, provenance papers, and chain of ownership records. Meanwhile, the supply from Mozambique has become more structured, but less emotionally priced. The African stones are now seen as the active market, while Brazilian stones function as artifacts of a closed system. The divergence is no longer about color alone. It's about the timestamp. For investors, Paraíba Tourmaline represents a rare alignment of factors: mineralogical novelty, geographical scarcity, and cultural fixation. The stone is not judged solely on clarity or carat weight. It is judged on glow, a non-metric visual effect that resists reproduction. Synthetic versions exist, but they fail to capture the entire spectrum of colors. Imitations flood lower markets, but labs filter them out. In the next 20 years, Paraíba Tourmaline will continue to function as a price anchor in colored stones, not because it is rare in general, but because the most desired form is both chemically unique and historically fixed. Its glow is measurable, its origin is finite, and its market is already defined by the absence of more. Second place, Kashmir Sapphire. No new Kashmir sapphires have entered the market in over a century. The original mine, nestled in the Himalayas at an elevation of 15,000 feet, yielded its finest stones between 1882 and 1887. After that, the supply diminished rapidly. By the early 20th century, the region was no longer producing gem-grade material. What remains today is a finite corpus of stones, preserved, recut, resold, but never replenished. Kashmir Sapphire is not the rarest sapphire by volume, nor the largest by carat weight. Its status comes from consistency. Every authenticated stone from the 1880s bears a distinct optical fingerprint, a medium blue hue, velvety texture, and subdued brilliance that softens under natural light. This visual softness, caused by minute rutile silk inclusions evenly distributed across the crystal, cannot be recreated in other sapphires, even from geologically similar deposits. For collectors, this phenomenon is not aesthetic alone, it is geological. The exact combination of aluminum-rich metamorphic rock, trace elements, and slow cooling over millions of years created a sapphire type that exists only within a narrow Himalayan corridor. Unlike corundum from Sri Lanka or Myanmar, Kashmir sapphires show no pleochroic extremes, no color zoning, and minimal extinction. The visual experience is uniform. It is this optical equilibrium that sets Kashmir sapphires apart, not only in market value, but in gemological classification. As early as the 1920s, stones from Kashmir were already being cataloged in European museum collections. Private sales in London and Paris treated them as legacy items, not adornments, but objects of geological finality. When high-grade specimens surface today, they are accompanied by detailed provenance, dates of discovery, ownership lineage, and laboratory verification. GIA and SSEF reports specifically use the term Kashmir origin, a designation that carries as much cultural gravity as it does mineralogical certainty. Over the last decade, the pricing trajectory in auctions has been steep yet stable. Atizan keto egaze titsed karatot nem hevitet, Kashmiri sarga saphir, arultak ket eges, nyolks tised $1,000,000 ketiser tisenkilensben. Egi masik tiseges keto tised karat, harom eges negi tised $1,000,000 ertem el ketiser hetvenkilensben. 2022, both exceeding $250,000 per carat. These are not anomalies. They reflect a system where value is tied to known limits. There is no new source, no undiscovered mine, only reappearance. The role of the stone in the gemstone economy has changed. Kashmir sapphire is no longer part of the dynamic market. It is an indexed asset, immune to oversupply, shielded from trend, and used by collectors as a benchmark for quality and closure. Its color is not the most saturated. Its clarity is not flawless. But its presence, once confirmed, alters the pricing structure of every blue sapphire placed beside it. In the next 20 years, Kashmir sapphire will not be discovered again. It will be reclassified, less as a gemstone, more as a historical constant, a standard not of rarity alone, but of finality. In first place, Alexandrite. Some gemstones are valued for color, others for clarity, a few for origin. Alexandrite is valued for its change. Under daylight, it presents a green, deep forest, occasionally with hints of blue-gray. Under incandescent light, it turns red, burgundy, wine, sometimes purple. This is not pleochroism. It is not fluorescence. It is a shift in color perception caused by differential absorption of the visible spectrum, triggered by the angle and temperature of ambient light. Alexandrite reacts to perception itself, and in doing so, it has come to symbolize a different kind of rarity. Discovered in Russia's Ural Mountains in 1830, Alexandrite was named for the then-crowned heir, later Tsar Alexander II. For decades, stones from this deposit circulated among the Romanov court and the elite of St. Petersburg. The mine, however, was short-lived. By the early 1900s, production had slowed to near zero. No second Ural deposit was found. Other sources emerged, such as Sri Lanka, Brazil, and Madagascar. But the color shift, the strength of saturation, and the daylight red balance remain difficult to match. What distinguishes Alexandrite is not just its visual transformation, but its consistency across change. In gemology, few stones exhibit multiple distinct color states without compromising optical clarity. Alexandrite does, and does so in gem-quality crystals over 2 carats, unheated, untreated, and singly refractive. Its behavior is replicable in lab tests, but unpredictable in experience. It is a controlled anomaly. In the auction market, Alexandrite occupies a different logic. It is neither fully colored nor fully categorized. Prices reflect not weight or cut alone, but the strength of change. Stones with greater than 90% color shift, verified under CIE spectrophotometry, fetch 2 to 3 times the value of rocks with weaker transitions. A 3.1 carat Ural origin Alexandrite sold in 2018 for $420,000 at Sotheby's Geneva. Another from Brazil, but with identical shift strength, reached $290,000. Provenance adds value, but behavior drives it. Geologically, the formation of Alexandrite requires beryllium and chromium in the same environment, a rare pairing, under orthorhombic crystallization, with a low iron content to preserve spectral clarity. This condition occurs in only a handful of locations globally, and never at an industrial scale. Mining has shifted from primary extraction to selective hand recovery from legacy zones. Supply, by definition, is terminal. For investors, Alexandrite is more than just a gemstone. It is an index of cognitive asymmetry, a mineral whose price tracks not just availability, but the human response to variance. Unlike sapphire or emerald, whose appeal lies in constancy, Alexandrite is traded on its willingness to alter, yet remain authentic. It is a paradox monetized. Over the next 20 years, Alexandrite will not rise due to the trend. It will increase because of the structure, chemical, perceptual, economic. It is the only gemstone for which value depends on the interaction between light and the eye, and for which no synthetic equivalent fully captures the phenomenon. The color changes. The mineral does not. The market has learned to price both accordingly. The stones shown here don't rise on trend. They rise on limitation, of color, of structure, of time. In a world of synthetic replication and algorithmic pricing, these gemstones resist both. Their value is not created. It's discovered, then defined by what cannot be repeated. Some will vanish from markets. Others will change how collections are built, how estates are structured, and how provenance is valued across generations. They are not just gemstones. They are records. And for the next 20 years, they will quietly redraw the boundary between what is owned and what is known. Let us know which one resonates with you in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel for more content like this.